The Pacers beat the Knicks in 6 games. They're on to the finals before we get too far ahead. How did they beat the Knicks? What did they do so well in that series? Does it apply to the finals as the Pacers keep rolling? We'll get to all of it today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Monday. Hope you had a great weekend. I'm sure many Pacers fans did. And welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes. And today, I am still regaining control of my voice, and the Pacers are still the 2025 Eastern Conference champions. They are headed to the NBA Finals. If you would like to hear about their journey here, some reflections on what made this all possible, the moment that is, Game 6 victory over New York, all that jazz. The more recent episode before this one is for you. Derek Kramer and I, from the arena after Game 6, had a lot to say. That people seem to really enjoy that episode. I'm sure the moment made that possible. Today, I want to finish up the Knicks series, take the shirt down from my background, and move the Pacers on to the Thunder, because the Knicks were a good team. They were not hurt at all. For the first time in the last 2 years of the Pacers run, no injuries marring the series of the opponent that the Pacers had. They beat the healthy, good Knicks, and they beat them in 6 games. They just beat them. What did they do so well? Is this stuff that matters in the finals? What does this tell us about the Pacers that we did or did not already know from earlier playoff series? I like to do these series wrap-ups. I did it in the Bucks round, and last round it was just me going like, hey, I'm a dummy. This round, it'll be fun. I picked Pacers in 7. They were a little better than that. They played great ball throughout the series, and I think the starting reason for that, the top of the list of stuff that I said I wanted to talk about this, were just quite simply obvious things. The Pacers stars were capital G great in the series against the Knicks. And we know that because of the voting for conference finals MVP. Pascal Siakam wins at 5-4 over Tyrese Haliburton. A lot of debate over that. I think that's right. I would have voted for Siakam myself. Haliburton was sensational, obviously. He had the best individual one game between the two, but I think Siakam's consistency shined through. He was excellent in the closeout game. He won them game 2 by himself. Even in Haliburton's terrific game, he had 30 himself. He didn't have any of the duds, right? He was just awesome the whole series. Haliburton, of course, was tremendous too, regardless of my own opinions on that. They were both fantastic, and they were both fantastic in different ways at different times. Siakam winning MVP of the series was important, and we'll get to these two guys later, but for a lot of the series, he absorbed the OG Anunoby matchup. The best one defender the Knicks can actually throw at the Pacers was on Pascal Siakam for several games of the series. Not the end. He was guarding Nembhard at times. He moved around. He was on Haliburton at times. Siakam ends the series with 52, 50, 67 splits and 25 points a game. Absurd stuff. 3-point shooting, that's a little warm, no doubt. But he was great at all these other things that the Knicks just could not handle. And this is the second straight series where there's a lot of chatter going into the series about matchups or switching to some extent and how that could either limit Haliburton or force the Pacers to get creative in how they attack. And the answer has been a lot of the time, hey, guess what? Pascal Siakam can score against your smalls every time. You can't switch that much against the Pacers. You can't actually live with these defensive assignments to start possessions. You putting Mikal Bridges, or I've been learning this whole series that everybody thinks I say his name wrong. I swear that's what I'm hearing people say for Bridges and what his basketball reference page is. Mikal Bridges, excuse me. I know Giannonobi, both excellent defenders, excellent players. You can put them on Haliburton, but if you screen and switch and one's on Siakam, or they screen and switch again, and now, God forbid, they're not on either of those guys, Siakam's got an advantage in this series. Like, he punished Cat all the time. He was crushing these smalls. That's where it started, is that he was just a matchup nightmare for the Knicks, and he was a blur in transition at 6'9". Like, that is unbelievably good. To close the series, his defense is what really popped too. His defense in Game 6 was unbelievably good. Off the ball, on the move, keeping his man in front. Really, really good stuff from Siakam. I think he deserved to be series MVP, and he was tremendous. And, of course, this sounds obvious, but in a series where both teams have 2 stud-level stars in the All-Star NBA level, whatever you want to say, rising to the top of that crew is very important. And Brunson and Cat were amazing on one end of the floor. Siakam was amazing on both ends of the floor in the series. His defense was really, really good on his way to those splits. Maybe his best series as a Pacer, the start of his Bucks series, having 38 and 37 in consecutive games when the rest of the Pacers weren't risen to this level. Maybe that is his best series. I would accept that. They don't win that series without him, certainly. They don't win this Knicks series without him as well. And this one's on a bigger stage. I would accept either one, but he was just awesome. And all the lead in before the series about who has the best 1B guy, whatever, he was the best guy, period. Just an awesome series. And so that doesn't even go back to any strategy thing or anything leading into the series that was like, oh, this will be an X factor important. Pascal Siakam just played terrific ball. Just absolutely fantastic. He got to carry both the Jerry West trophy and the Eastern Conference Finals MVP trophy onto the days because he was so good. Let's get to Haliburton next. And I already said his name, so this is no longer an interesting trivia fact. I planned on bleeding into my Tyrese Haliburton Conference Finals conversation by saying, who do you think led the Pacers in rebounding during the 2025 Eastern Conference Finals? And at 6 per game, a whole rebound per game more than any other player on the team. The answer is Tyrese Haliburton. Only 2 players on the Pacers grabbed 30 rebounds in the series. It was Siakam at 30 and Haliburton at 36. Everybody else at 28 or lower. In fact, Toppin at 28, Neesmith 24. Nobody else even gets to the 20s. Haliburton was the best rebounder in the series. 1, what? Crazy. 2, think back to when the series is coming. A lot of chatter about something the Knicks do very well. They're great on the offensive glass. And it wasn't just their bigs. I talked the most about OG Anunoby and Josh Hart. Not as much Bridges, who was Haliburton's assignment a lot of the time, but everybody on the Knicks is somewhat crashing. Crashing has typically been a good way to stop the Pacers and keep them out of transition. And it's not like Haliburton finished every single possession guarding his man. He spent time on everybody. Everybody guarded everybody at times throughout the series. So it actually mattered more than just the ball bouncing his way or him getting it off the rim and pushing, that he got the boards. It also hurts the Knicks. It's something they're very good at. I talked about how they generate their points and how their offensive numbers suggest so much more than their per possession shooting numbers. It's because they were so good on the offensive glass. And they did have a lot of success rebounding in the series, a lot. But they could have had more if Tyrese Haliburton wasn't the Pacers' leading rebounder in the series, their point guard. I didn't even realize that until today. Just phenomenal stuff. And oh, by the way, he averaged a double-double on top of that. Look, he had obviously a very what was that? Game 5, especially after the game of his life in Game 4. Game 6, I think if he flipped halves, he might have won series MVP. He was amazing in the second half and just kind of like, yeah, it's fine enough in the first half. The 14-point Game 2 where Siakam carried, he was fine, but Siakam was the showstopper, right? Every game, Haliburton was great. 2 30-point double-doubles, a 30-point triple-double, 2 no-turnover games. Like, he was obviously just phenomenal. And he was phenomenal at the stuff he was great at. And is great at. And he was so good in this series. And in a way, you like the other argument in favor of Haliburton MVP, I almost just said this in a confusing way, is that their identity, which is a key part of how they won this series, they play so fast, almost a 98 pace in this entire series. And Haliburton is the reason they play that way. So his just mere existence adds value to the Pacers and their win probability, even if he is not having the best time. Like in Game 2, for example, when he has a nice game and has a positive impact despite shooting 5 for 16. You know, that I buy that argument. I think that makes sense. So I understand that, and he did that in this series, even though he was more up and down. But in general, he was more up than down. It's not even close. 46% from the field, despite not shooting well from 3 and taking a high volume of his shots from deep. 11 assists per game, setting up his teammates, getting into the paint every game except for 1 in the entire series. Only 10 turnovers in 220 minutes. So it's 1 turnover every 22 minutes of play in a conference final series against a good defense. Remarkable stuff. Remarkable stuff. Coming into the series, we talked about all these things. Me and Gavin, me and guests, we talked about all these things that were important. The depth of both of these teams, the pace battle, what's going to be different here, what's going to be different there. It's so easy to talk about all that stuff. It does matter a ton. A key part of the Pacers winning so much is their style is demanding to play against, and their depth is really good. And we'll talk about those things in a second. In this series, the stars were stars, and they won multiple games on the back of their stars just being the best player in that game. Game 2 for sure, game 4 for sure. And they're moving on as a result. So many more things I want to get to, and many of them a little bit more tangible and nitty-gritty that actually could bleed into analysis of how the Pacers will play or could play or hope to play against the Oklahoma City Thunder in the actual upcoming NBA Finals. Before we do any of that, we got to talk about Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where'd all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That is where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. It's not just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. With Monarch Money, you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. They have so many surprising insights they can offer into certain spending categories that you might be spending too much in. So you can budget smarter and save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, it's all right there. And easy collaboration across multiple accounts, shared accounts, whatever, with your partner. Set goals, stay on the same page. Without the stress, take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONNBA for half off of your first year. Back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. It's June and the Pacers are still playing. The weather's nice. And make your second listen today, Locked On Knicks, for the last time. Hear about what they think about how the Pacers beat them in this series. A lot of experts picked the Knicks. They had home court advantage, and they lost. They lost twice at home. They watched Tyrese Haliburton bounce the ball 17 feet above the rim. Oof. The Knicks had a great playoff run. Gavin and Alex do a great job covering that team. The Pacers were better than them. There's nothing else to say. The Pacers dealt with more injuries than the Knicks in this series. Aaron Nesmith was very limited one game, exits in another, and they still won the series. Tony Bradley actually mattered. He was unavailable. Cat was banged up by the end. That definitely matters as well. Okay, two ways I want to talk about the Pacers' depth in this series, because everybody, including me, talked about how it could be or should be an advantage for the Pacers in the series. It was last year. They play lots of guys. The Knicks don't play lots of guys. To the Knicks' credit, they found answers to that throughout the series with depthier lineups, featuring Shamet, who was really, really, really good in his spot minutes, and Daylon Wright, who I thought should have played more, which was weird to think about at times. Pacers win this series because of some of their depth stuff, and I would like to specifically talk about one pairing of bench group, because this is what struck me as you look back at plus-minus data every game. I know plus-minus can be fluky in singular games and things like that, but there were a lot of games the Pacers rotation is typically like this, and somehow people complain every game when they do the same thing every game, and it almost always produces a good result. Starters start the game. The first sub in is Obi Toppin for Pascal Siakam and someone else. Sometimes it's McConnell for Nembhard. Sometimes it's Mathurin for Nesmith. Sometimes it's Shepard for one of those guards. Very rarely, but not never, it's a center for Myles Turner. But usually it's Obi Toppin for Siakam. And then later in the first quarter, what happens is, as the rest of the bench comes in, Siakam comes back in as Haliburton exits. They might overlap for a few possessions, but then Haliburton comes out. And so by the end of the quarter, and then early in the second quarter, the lineup on the floor is usually Siakam and 3 or 4 bench players. So that's the Pacers' way of making sure that they always have one of their stars on the floor. And I've had it described, I'm over-explaining this, but I've had it described to me in the NBA that a lot of players are 2-stint players and a half, and a lot of players are 3-stint players and a half. And some bench guys are 1, whatever you want to say. So Siakam is a 3-stint player. The first part of every half, then end of first, early second, and then the end of the half. And then that's the same, except change it to third, fourth. Whereas Haliburton would be like a long stint early and the long stint late. He's a 2-stint player. Not that one's better than the other. It's just a different way to get to the same number of minutes. I'm over-explaining this to say very important stretches for the Pacers in this game were Siakam, 3 bench guys, and 1 other starter, right? Those mix and match groups were talked about a ton heading into this series. The Pacers have not done well with those groups entering this series in the playoffs. They've had a lot of bench struggles. They've had to, change things around, figure out who's with who, what made the most sense. Everybody's belly aching about who's playing with who. In this series, in those moments, with one of Siakam on the floor and one or fewer, none of the other starters off. The Pacers won those minutes, 32 minutes. So we're talking multiple minutes every game. They won those minutes. Turner, Siakam, and 3 bench players was +5. Siakam, Haliburton, and 3 bench players was +5. Siakam, Nesmith, and 3 bench players was +4. Siakam, Nembhard, and 3 bench players was +3. And Siakam, that's a different one. I'm having trouble finding the Siakam Turner one. Regardless, very, very good that those lineups were as good as they were, because that is where the Pacers' depth matters the most. This is when they're getting the most out of the combinations that involve their bench players, especially in those stretches when the Knicks' typical lineup on the floor is like Cat and a bunch of bench guys, or Brunson and some big wings and Mitchell Robinson, and like all those guys had success. So to find ways to succeed in those minutes was very important, and Siakam being so good in this series made it possible for the Pacers to keep playing their way and find ways to score, ways to get enough stops with those groups. And the other part of depth that mattered is something I mentioned before the series is I think the Pacers reliably feel like they have a guy or 2 or 3 or whatever on their team who's going to give them great minutes in every game. But if you're going to talk about depth, you're going to need that depth to be good. Who is going to be the guy deep on their bench to help every game? Or just a non-star player. And a lot of times that's a bench guy too, but who's going to step up and be huge in every single game. That's what they needed. So Siakam plus the bench groups is the first way I looked at depth being a way the Pacers won the series. The second one is the Siakam, is one depth guy or role guy was awesome in every win. Obviously, in game 1, it was Aaron Nesmith, 30 points. You cannot call him a depth guy. I would not call him a depth guy, but he is considered a role player, and he won them that game with the heater of a lifetime. Unbelievable from him. Now, off the bench, McConnell had a great first half of that game. Toppin's pace and 10 rebounds are important in that game. And if you want to count those guys as depth guys, everybody would. They were awesome off the bench in the Pacers' first win of the series. And they needed this every game, right? The Knicks didn't at that point in the series, the Knicks were not relying on their depth very much. It progressed and things changed. Game 2, another Pacers win. Siakam obviously stole the show, 39 points. McConnell, great off the bench again. Ben Shepherd, his best game of the series with those 2 threes. And as everybody remembers, a real talking point that mattered. A guy who got to answer questions after a conference finals game because he played that well in 8 minutes. Tony Bradley up to the plate, stopping the Knicks' key adjustment by rebounding his butt off against Mitchell Robinson. They got the depth advantage in that game. And this is a theme that we'll keep running through so I can remind you of what happened in the series. But as you can tell, the Pacers needed their depth to be an advantage given a lot of other things about the series, and it was. Game 4, the Haliburton game. Obviously, Haliburton is the story of how they won this game. Everybody remembers the Bennedict Mathurin experience in that game. Unbelievable. He was so good. The most points ever by a player with under 14 minutes of playing a playoff game ever in that game. Awesome night. They got good enough play from the rest of their bench, but he was terrific in that game. And game 6, it just happened out of nowhere. The closer, he was excellent against the Cavs in game 5. I thought that might have been his best closing game of this playoffs. Thomas Bryant, 11 points, taking over the third quarter of that game. Awesome performance, getting the crowd into it. Corner 3 after corner 3 after corner 3. And he wasn't even the best bench guy. Obi Toppin was similarly phenomenal with 18 points in that game. He had a great series, I thought. Toppin, when he is absolutely dialed in and moving, and he had a lot of blocks in the series. I wonder if he led the Pacers in blocks. When he is absolutely dialed in and moving, he just looks awesome because he automatically adds pace to a game because he's got these gazelle-like strides and can make threes, so people are chasing him a lot. And he was very good in game 6, and the Knicks just don't want to play that way. So the 2 ways I would look at depth in this series, because everybody correctly identified this could be an advantage for the Pacers in the series, was 1, to make their bench lineups work, Pascal Siakam was a glue guy. I wrote that in a story after game 2 that I think he's an all-star and a glue guy, and he was in this series. He made those lineups hum and be awesome. But the second thing that mattered about their depth is they had, counting Nesmith feels like a little bit of a stretch, but their bench was still good in game 1. They had an exceptional performer off the bench in basically every game that they won in the series. It was a huge factor. So many things went well for the Pacers. And there's one more that I want to talk about on the other end of the floor. The big defensive wings, what every team covets. Pacers neutralize them. And then we'll talk about OKC to close out today's Locked On Pacers. We are back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Our second listen, Locked On Thunder. To hear about the Thunder from Rylan Stiles, you'll be hearing from him tomorrow. We're going to do a crossover on this feed and his feed. And I got to take the shirt down. I don't know if I have a Thunder shirt. I might need to get an Amazon thing going there to get it going. It's finals time. I got to have the background looking crisp for you YouTube watchers. Okay, let's move on to something that I thought was going to be fascinating in this series. Gavin Shaw and I talked about this in our series preview a little bit. Okay, we talked about the stars. We did that part of it. That's a huge part of it. Then guy 3, Anunoby, Turner, the Nembhard-Nesmith duo. Bridges is their heart star. All these guys. Who's going to rise up well above that group? And Mikal Bridges, I hope I didn't just say it wrong again. Mikal Bridges can really shoot. He had a monster game against Boston. He hits all these flicking the ball in fadeaways in the lane. I wish he would stop fading away, but he's very good at that at times. And can really guard. He was on Haliburton a lot of series. And OG Anunoby, who starts the series on Siakam and has made threes the whole time and had like a very important growth on offensive season, seem like the two kinds of wings that every team craves. There's a reason the Knicks gave up a lot for both of them. And I wondered how impactful they would be in the series, and I thought the answer would be very high. The Pacers did a great job of limiting their impact. And I don't think people realize this. I think like you would know it intuitively if you looked up the stats of the series. But the Knicks' leading guy in minutes in this series, think about it right now who you think it is. And you probably get where I'm going with this. It's not Towns. Towns was 4th. It's not Brunson. It was Bridges, who played 229. And in second, still not Brunson or Towns, it was Anunoby, because those two have skills that fit in any lineup. They can guard. They can make shots. They're efficient. They move well. The Knicks are the Knicks because of what those two do on both ends and how they cover up for teammates and make things easier, right? They're good players. And so they can have a huge impact on the series when they can defend stars, at least credibly-ish, and make shots. They defended, and they weren't that awesome. And they were good, but they weren't that awesome. And I think that is a ton of credit to the Pacers for the way they played in the series. Anunoby is huge. He can be a tank when he's flying towards the rim. He improved as a shooter this year. He had 14 steals in this series. He just rips the ball from you and shreds it up. He was so close to making all defense this year. The Pacers made him uncomfortable on offense. He never got rolling from deep. He only made 29% of his threes. And he just never had it going on that end. On defense, he was quite good. He shut down Nembhard in game 5. He was the best Siakam matchup they had in a series where Siakam was a matchup nightmare for everybody he played against. But they didn't let him just wreck the game that often. He did a few times. Again, amazing player, but did not change the series enough. And the Pacers deserve credit for that. And then Bridges was on Haliburton, and that had a great result for the Knicks in game 5. But largely, I was like, I don't know if that was enough. I just don't know if it was. The face guarding usually works once a series. He was moving well off the ball in that game as well, but he didn't have the defensive impact I thought he might. And on offense, it's 46.6% from the field. That's fine. 35% from deep is fine. Who watched it and felt like Mikal Bridges had this? Oh my God, I'm going to stop saying his first name. Had this awesome offensive impact in the series. Ton of fadeaways. His shots never felt that threatening, to me at least. I'm not saying he played bad. I thought both those guys had positive impact series, but they end with below average true shooting on decent usage, about 20% each, right? Bridges' turnover rate was really high. Anunoby didn't hit the glass as much as he did during the regular season. And all of a sudden, those two guys who were very important and very handsomely paid to do important things for the Knicks were not as important as I expected. And some of that is because they missed some shots. And some of that's because the Pacers' best players, the stars that I led the show with, did a great job making their skills, their high-level abilities, not as impactful, their defensive abilities. And Bridges' offense was goofy, and Anunoby couldn't make stuff, and his power wasn't as important, except for that one game where he just punked Andrew Nembhard a few times. Keeping those wings out of huge impact moments and huge impact series was a very big deal for the Pacers. And that gets us to the Thunder, because a lot of the stuff I talked about, depth, the Thunder have depth. They have a lot of depth. Pace, we're going to talk about pace a lot with the Pacers in the playoffs. They played faster than everybody so far. One of the two teams with a better pace than them is the Thunder in the playoffs. By better, I mean faster. I don't mean better. And the reason I bring that up is because their pace is different than the Pacers. Their pace is really high because there's so many possessions in a game where they just take the ball from the other team and score really quick. So it's a short defensive possession and short offensive. I bet their seconds per possession is slower than the Pacers, but their pace is faster, if that makes sense. All the stuff I talked about the Knicks series, the stars have to be great. The limiting the third banana options has to happen, right? Whoever you think that is for this Thunder team, if it's Chet to you, if it's a guard, whatever, that has to happen. The depth for the Pacers is going to be harder for them to be an advantage. The third banana stuff is going to be harder. And having the stars be sensational all the time against that defense is going to be hard. So that's thing one of a launching point is the stuff that worked well against the Knicks can work against the Thunder. It's just harder. All of them are. But the Pacers are good at hard stuff. They're a good team. They don't lose twice in a row ever. They're very good. But that's part one of this. Part two of this is a lot of those will not be as key of issues to me for the OKC series. If you wanted to really dumb down the Knicks series, which I'd be fine with because I've talked about this stat a few times in the playoffs recently, just jump right to effective field goal percentage, right? In the series, the Pacers' effective field goal percentage was 56.3. The Knicks was 53.8. 2.5% difference over the course of a game. That's like 5 points, right? And the Pacers end up winning the series by a total of something like that. No, they were better, deservedly. But they needed to make shots. And all throughout the regular season, the Pacers have been great at generating open shots. Fourth in effective field goal percentage in the regular season, rocking it in that category in the postseason. Everybody knows. Everybody's seen this. This is not a secret. Okay. You go play the Thunder, and everything looks different. The Pacers finish with a better per possession effective field goal percentage than the Thunder. But the Thunder shoot way more shots than you in a game. And that is where they get you. Turnover rate. The Thunder were first in the league, the lowest, 10.3%. Pacers did a good job at this. They were the sixth lowest. Haliburton never turns it over. He's got the ball all the time. The Thunder always force their opponents into turnovers, second most of any team. The Pacers were 12th there. And the Knicks. The Thunder are mediocre on the glass. They're about average on offensive boards and average a little better than that on defensive boards. The Pacers are not good on the glass. The Pacers in defensive rebound rate are, I can't even find them because apparently I can't read, are low, and on the offensive, even lower. They're 21st in defense. Why did that take me so long? That was terrible. And 29th on offense. To put this all together, this did not become as much of a thing in the Knicks series. In fact, if anything, it flipped. The Pacers forced a ton of turnovers against the Knicks to their advantage. Turnover rated advantage was Pacers plus 2.1%. Right? For the series, the Pacers had 75 turnovers in 6 games. The Knicks had 93. 18 possessions. That's a huge deal. That is 3 possessions per game. Imagine starting off up 7-0. That's what the turnover battle was. The Thunder are the masters of possession, and the difference between their effective field goal percentage per play and the Pacers is infinitesimally small. And so I don't think this was a huge thing in Knicks Pacers. Is a big deal. The possession battle is big all the time. The Pacers will tell you that. But the possession battle is now the thing to me. If the Pacers are even or lose the possession battle in any game against the Thunder, it doesn't matter if the stars are awesome or the depth is good or the Siakam plus bench groups are useful or the third bananas have good games. They're going to be in a hole because Shea's that good and the Thunder are that good, right? So that is where this all changes, is all that stuff that mattered against the Knicks. And obviously guys playing good. It's like the crux of basketball matters. But the biggest thing against the Thunder is not something that mattered as much against the Knicks because the Pacers don't need to dominate the possession battle to beat the Knicks. They can generate good shots all the time. Millions of good threes in game 6. And they won. And that's how they beat the Knicks. And that's what will be the biggest difference in the NBA Finals, which starts on Thursday. Tomorrow, we'll get a better look at the Thunder with Rylan Stiles of Locked On Thunder. Him and I will both be at all these games. Should be a blast. And then we'll do the Pacers Advantages show for Wednesday. Game 1 preview for Thursday. Should be in OKC by Tuesday night. We'll see how this week shakes out or what chances I get to actually use my computer and do stuff. I think I'm going to drive there, which is crazy to think about. So we'll see where this all goes, but expect episodes, of course, every day until the Pacers are eliminated. Thank you all so much for listening today. You can find me on Twitter at Tony R. East and at Blue Sky under the same handle. This podcast is at Locked On Pacers on Twitter. and Locked On Pacers on Instagram. Thank you all so much for listening. Hope you had a wonderful weekend and enjoyed the Pacers conference finals win. We will see you tomorrow.